Hello and welcome back to another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Mercury Weather. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing great. You know, we last week we filled the app gap, as I called it in the title of the episode. And one of the questions you had, which I kept thinking about after we recorded, was easy ways to kind of move files quickly between two Macs on the same network, or not even necessarily on the same network. Maybe you're out and about and you want to send something back home. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me, of course, the answer is always Tailscale.
Always.
Because
I am so happy. Please explain what the recommendation was.
Yes, I told you. I said, you know what? Tailscale has had this feature called Taildrop for a while now. It's been in beta for quite a while.
Still in beta. It's still labeled as a beta feature.
And it was, I think the first time I tried it was last summer. So it's been in beta for quite a while. But one of the things they did recently was they updated the Mac app with a little drop zone in the window of the app where it makes it very easy just to drop in a file and then pick where you want it to go. And it goes. And it goes very, very quickly because of the way Tailscale works. And on top of that, there is a CLI for Taildrop now too. So you can work it into various skills and other things that you're doing in Claude, Code, or Codex. So it's a really good way to do it. I've been using it a lot. The two things that I do a lot with moving things between Macs, because I don't have an upstairs and a downstairs computer, Federico. I have a downstairs and an upstairs computer. It's a little different because my downstairs is where my office is.
Isn't that the same? Hold on.
It's the opposite way around.
What?
Steven goes from up because he's on the top floor to down with his family. I go from down to up because I'm on the first floor.
Okay, I see.
That's the difference.
I see.
That's the difference. But my on-the-go Mac is the MacBook Pro, and a lot of times in the evening I'll be sitting on the couch and maybe doing something on the laptop, and I want to get something. And I do this actually on the iPad and iPhone too, because a lot of times I'll just be even reading and find a link that I want to deal with later. So I use Sindrasaurus's app called Hyperduck, which lets you send a URL, or I think just a URL. Mm-hmm. I always use it for URL. Send a URL to another Mac. And it's just kind of handy to say I want to read this article later, but I want to do it at my desk because it's work related or something. Shoot it down to my Mac Studio and it's there via iCloud very quickly. And I'll deal with it when I get there because it opens a new tab. So I use that a lot, but I also use Taildrop a lot because it's just a very, very fast way and easy way to move things back and forth between multiple computers.
Yeah, I've been so happy with this discovery. I have immediately created a skill for Claude Code and Codex that essentially teaches the agent how to send me any file using the command line command for Tailscale. It's just a Tailscale file and then the path to the file and then the name of the destination device, something that I did since in your Tailscale network. Each device has a unique identifier. In the skill, I created aliases and synonyms for my devices. Like, for example,
that's a good idea.
If the iPhone identifier is 17 Pro, I made the skill so that I can just say, send it to my iPhone, and he knows that that's an alias for 17 Pro. And because of this, I think, this system that I've been working on forever, Shortcuts Playground, to create shortcuts with natural language, that started as a simple skill in January for Claude Code and has evolved into a native plugin for Codex and Claude Code over the past 4.5 months. I think I'm going to add support to the shortcut for Tailscale. Because right now there's the plugin which will be free to use for everybody, and there'll be an extra shortcut just for club members. And the shortcut, the whole point of it is that it's sort of like a meta shortcut in that it's a shortcut that creates other shortcuts. It communicates with Shortcuts Playground running on a Mac somewhere in your network, since these coding agents are Mac only. But the shortcut itself was designed to essentially, through various hoops, get back the .shortcut file that was created somewhere on your machine and install it for you on iOS.
Right.
And I think I'm just going to make a little setting option in the shortcut that tells you, do you want to have the native method of sort of getting the shortcut from your file system, or do you just want to use the Tailscale integration? And in that case, it'll add a basic line to the prompt that says, send the shortcut to my iPad or something like that. So you will be able to choose, which is and it's so nice because when you do that, when you use the Tailscale integration, you get a notification on your iPhone. So you don't need to leave the Shortcuts Playground shortcut open and running. You get a notification at the end. You click on the notification. The file gets saved in the Files app in the Tailscale file provider extension. And you can just tap on that .shortcut file and it instantly reopens in the Shortcuts app. So it's kind of perfect.
Yeah, it is really nice. And it's probably worth mentioning just for more context for people who aren't familiar with Tailscale is that, and I've written about Tailscale in the past, it's been a while, but for club members, that Tailscale works on your Mac, your iPhone, your iPad. It's on all the devices.
On Android, on Windows.
And I mean, it's everywhere. I literally have Windows handhelds with Tailscale on them because it makes it really easy to move your games instead of having to deal with micro SD cards. You can move your games directly from like a Mac onto a Windows handheld, which is fantastic. But what it's doing, I mean, it's very technical what it's doing under the hood, but what it is essentially doing is creating a private VPN that's just a VPN of your devices. So it's making a network that's separate of your devices, and then it has various ways to connect out to the rest of the internet from there, and you can connect back and forth to Tailscale in different ways, both public and securely, with other different features that Tailscale happens to have. But I think a good starting point for anybody who's trying to set up Tailscale and wondering what would I use this for, you can use it to move very large files from one device to another very quickly, either on your home network or when you're off your network. That's where I got started with this. It was like going to WWDC and wanting to get a document of like a podcast recording back and forth between my Mac at home and the laptop I was using in Cupertino. So it's that kind of thing that is really useful for. But with Taildrop and with some of the stuff you can do now via the CLI and agents, I think Tailscale is really having a moment where it's even more useful for more reasons to a lot of people.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Mercury Weather. Mercury Weather is the thoughtfully designed weather app that shows all of the essential weather details at a glance. It has a gorgeous, colorful interface that dynamically adapts to conditions, with a warm orange palette on sunny days, icy tones on a cold day, and deep blue on rainy nights. Mercury uses a glanceable chart layout to present the hourly and daily forecast in a way that feels intuitive right away. Plus, there's a really cool feature for frequent travelers. Mercury's trip forecast automatically shows the weather at your destination right in your daily forecast timeline. So you'll always see the weather where you'll be, not just where you are. I've been using Mercury Weather since the earliest days of the app, and I love it. For me, it's all about the design. There's a lot of information packed into Mercury Weather, but it's all presented in a way that's very easy to understand quickly. Plus, it has a great watch app, which I think is really underrated because it has some of the best complications that I've ever seen for a weather app that make it really easy to check the forecast from your wrist. And when weather gets serious, Mercury offers storm and hurricane tracking with maps, live positions, forecast paths, cones, and intensity, plus widgets so you can keep tabs on specific storms or the closest one right from your home screen. Mercury Weather's gorgeous interface makes it a delight to check the weather every day, even on those gray, rainy ones. And the app's business model is simple, too. No ads and no selling of user data. Mercury is available on iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, and Mac. You can download it, use the standard features for free, and upgrade to Mercury Premium to unlock all features. Go to mercuryweather.app/stories mercury.app/AppStories to download Mercury Weather now. Use that link so they know you came from the show. That's mercuryweather.app/AppStories. Try it out. Get all the standard features for free. Our thanks to Mercury Weather for their support of the show.
All right. So that was follow-up. What are we talking about today, John?
Well, today I want to talk about Codex, OpenAI's super app. It's funny that we're here talking about this because I think less than maybe a month ago, you had announced that you were trying to consolidate around Claude.
Mm-hmm.
And then we mocked Codex a little bit for being a super app. I certainly was skeptical of it. But then they actually came out and they took Codex and added a bunch of features to it. And it have publicly announced that it's going to be what they consider their super app. And I think they did a very nice job with it. And I kind of see better, more clearly now where OpenAI is going with Codex as an everything app in a lot of ways. And I think it's got a lot of promise, but still a ways to go. I'd like to see more, but they added a whole bunch of features. You've been using it a lot more than me. I've been using it as a backstop to Claude mainly, especially when I'm doing coding where I get to a point with Claude and maybe Claude's having trouble, or maybe I'm just at a good break point and I want to check the work of Claude and make sure the stuff isn't full of bugs. And I'd have Codex do that and review the work and kind of go back and forth between them. But I'm even finding myself now gravitating towards Codex. And I think a lot of that has to do with not just the app itself, but GPT 5.5, which was released not too long ago. And I wanted to talk about it because, I mean, things move so quickly in this area that, I mean, we've written a fair amount about Claude Code and Codex over the past many months, but there's so much going on that I think it helps just to kind of get it out on the podcast because there are things about Codex we haven't really talked about anywhere else. And I think it's useful for people to know and try to understand what it is you can do that's useful with this. I mean, I think from our perspective, we come at this from the very practical, well, why is this better? What can it do? How can it help us get our jobs done? And that's kind of, I think, what I want to talk to you about.
Yeah. It's funny how things can change so quickly in this space, but this is just sort of the reality that we're living in right now. So the short version is that I really like using the Codex app on the Mac, especially because of the computer use integration that comes directly from Sky, which I wrote about on AppStories a couple of weeks ago. And I was skeptical about the idea of a super app. I guess in the context of ChatGPT, I think it makes a lot more sense for Codex as, if you think of Codex not as a programming utility, but as an agent for a little bit of everything, I think it starts to make a little bit more sense. And that's exactly how I've been using Codex. I use Codex, sure, for some programming tasks, for things that I am creating for myself or for the public, like Apple Frames, for example, or the Shortcuts plugin that I mentioned, or some integrations that I will soon share for Club AppStories members. But I'm also using Codex for general, like, computer assistance. And from that perspective, I think having the computer use integration, the built-in web browser, and the browser use skill, which allows Codex to essentially control its own web browser built into the app. The automations, the plugins, and the skills, like everything comes together in this sort of productivity package, right? That essentially uses the AI and the model underneath to orchestrate a bunch of different things that you can do on your Mac. It's sure, like the name suggests that it's a coding utility. It's still primarily designed for programmers, but I think that the recent updates and the fact that OpenAI continues to simplify some of the features and to give those features a proper UI, it suggests that the company wants to make it more of a productivity super app for general purpose agentic workflows rather than just programming and coding.
Right. And that's very much what Claude Cowork is right now.
Yes.
It's taking the coding agent that's in Claude Code and applying it to everyday tasks like email or dealing with your file system and that kind of thing. I think like one good example of the kind of thing that I've found incredibly useful recently that I think shows why these these agents can be so useful is, we've talked about how we're getting an awful lot of app pitches these days. And what I've been doing is taking those app pitches, which oftentimes have a bunch of links in them to the store, to the app store, to the developer's website, maybe the app's website, that sort of thing. Having Claude, in most instances up until now, go out, look at those URLs, look at the email, consolidate it all into one big outline that preserves all the links and everything and all the information that developers provided me with, turns it into a Notion document, then takes the URL of that Notion document, drops it into a task, and gives me a deadline to take a look at it. So I can look at everything in one place all at once and have the links to follow to get back to the email, to get to the websites and all of that if I want. And that's the kind of thing, the kind of productivity aspect of this that I think that these agents are really good with. And the reason that I have kind of the reason I've become more interested in Codex is in part because Claude has had a real rough 2 or 3 weeks. And I know that that seems like a lifetime with these AI agents. And what's happened is, Anthropic mentioned it. They wrote a blog post about how they introduced some bugs into the way they had been adjusting the harness that Claude Code uses, and essentially made Claude Code really dumb for a couple of weeks. And I don't think it has fully recovered, or it may just be that their Opus 4.7 is a regression in certain areas. Because one good example is I had a fairly simple, the thing I just described with taking the emails about apps and turning them into tasks and Notion documents. I tried 4 times to save that skill that I created that does that. And every single time Claude told me that it had saved it, and it hadn't. Because what it had done is at some point it had convinced itself that it could save things in non-permanent memory and that it would be okay and that it was actually permanent. And I finally tracked it down by having Claude go and read Claude's documentation and figure out where is it saving it and why is it getting wiped out every single time. It took 4 tries for Claude to figure out that it was doing that. And that was just, it's just frustrating, when you have a tool, and it's inherent in these tools to a degree, but there's always variability in the responses you get because of the way they work. However, things like that, where you're actually going from, oh, I know it can do this thing, to, oh, now it can't do this thing anymore, is an interesting lesson learned and also very frustrating. So that's one reason I've been kind of looking at Codex more myself.
Yeah, so the issues with the Claude model were also one of the reasons why I decided to move back to Codex. I really dislike the release of Opus 4.7 with the adaptive thinking by default. I never ever want to use a model with adaptive thinking, especially when I'm paying good money for a subscription. There's also the fact that for a while I have been using both Claude Code and Codex to create things for me and also things for the public, like the Apple Frames CLI, for example. Right. And I'm not a programmer, but I do, I tinker with things enough to know when something is wrong or something, needs more work. Yep. And consistently, Codex has been the better coding model, in my opinion. Especially when it comes to reviewing, sloppy code created by another AI, or finding security holes, or, cleaning things up, linting code, stuff like that. I also, in comparing the 2 desktop apps, Claude on the Mac and Codex on the Mac, I think Codex is the better Mac app. It's faster. Claude on the Mac is full of weird interaction bugs. And, all things being equal between these two, I don't know if Codex is Electron or not, or if it's using
I think Well, I don't know, actually. I guess it's the ChatGPT that's native. I'm not sure about Codex.
Yeah, all things being equal, let's assume they are both cross-platform apps because Codex is also available on Windows.
Yeah.
I think Codex is infinitely better than Claude on the Mac. That is full of like weird performance issues, makes my Mac run hot every single time. It's sometimes you resize the window and the layout goes bonkers. Like there are so many weird things, and that leads me into the other problem that I've been having with Anthropic lately, which is I understand having momentum, but also sometimes they ship too fast to a fault. And it feels like introducing a new feature every day is cool until it's not, until it becomes like too hard to keep up with changes and breaking changes and new features that are sort of like half put together. And whereas with Codex, it feels a little bit more deliberate. And
Right.
it feels like the improvements are coming at a more reasonable pace.
I also appreciate the built-in terminal and the built-in file
Yes.
navigator, things like that, which you don't have in Claude Code at this
Yes,
point. Or
exactly.
In the Claude
Exactly.
desktop app.
Which is why overall, I think it all comes down to the fact that Codex is the better app. Like so many little touches, like the built-in integrations for like when Codex generates a markdown file for you, you can choose to for example to open it in your default app, or you can copy the path, or you can just right click on it and say reveal in Finder, and it just shows you the file in the Finder. And I guess I'll give you some examples. I mean, John, beyond regular vibe coding or coding, but like using Codex as a productivity assistant. This morning, I finally took the time to do some research about the value of some Pokemon cards that I've had with me for the past 2-3 years. Maybe even more since the pandemic. I don't remember. But these are Pokemon cards that I bought when I was a kid. Most of them are from the 2002 and 2003 era. So these are over 20 years old. And I've known for a while that I was sitting on some pretty valuable Pokemon cards. I just didn't know how to put a number on it.
And a friend of yours finally poked you to get on this, right?
Finally encouraged me with some really bad Italian words, basically telling me that I'm an idiot for not doing this sooner, to do some research, get a value, get a number out of this. We're talking about like 60 valuable cards, plus a whole other like plastic bag full of like, I don't know, 200 like more common / medium Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
It's a pretty sizable collection from when I was a kid. So what I did, I took 4 photos with my iPhone at 48 megapixels because I knew that the model was going to zoom in. And so I wanted to have as much detail as possible. I laid them all out on my kitchen table, and I took a bunch of pictures. Then I opened Codex on the Mac, and I said, I need you to, I did this in Italian, but I said, I need you to tell me how much value I'm sitting on with these Pokemon cards. They are in pretty great condition. They're not damaged. They are mostly from the 2002-2003 era. I'm going to give you the 4 photos. You can zoom in, you can crop them, you can use OCR, do whatever you want. Understand each individual Pokemon card, put together a database, and use either APIs that you discover on the web, or you can use your browser, built-in browser integration to navigate to websites like Card Market, for example, is one of them, and look up each individual card, update the database, and tell me which one, tell me what they're worth on the used market right now, and give me recommendations if I'm supposed to grade these cards by a professional company so that I can bump the value even more. It worked on this for a couple of hours. Now, this is not a coding task. Codex sure used some coding behind the scenes. It ran a bunch of Python, a bunch of scripts, a bunch of API calls. But it orchestrated all these tools for a non-programming task, which is, I need to know how much money I'm going to make with these Pokemon cards.
Right.
And after 2 hours, it told me what my friend also told me, that yes, I should get at least 6 or 7 of these cards graded. There's at least one of them that is worth a couple of $1,000, John.
Crazy. Wow.
And then bring them to a store and see, what deal I can make with them, plus all the other ones that I'm not getting graded because it's not worth it. But you can still sell them for like $10 or $15 or something.
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting on a fortune. I'm not gonna make $100,000 with this, but I'm gonna make if things go well,
I'm gonna make good money though.
I'm gonna make good money. I'm gonna make a few thousand euros, I think.
Yeah.
And that's pretty great. I mean,
it's a few thousand euros you didn't have, yesterday, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
now, what's really nice here is that I use Codex for a general research and productivity task that, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm still going to have to go to a store and sell these cards.
But it would have taken you a long time to do that research on your own.
But at least I can go in. It would have taken me much longer than the 2 hours it took Codex. And at least I can go in with a pretty good sense of, so that I don't get scammed, so that I know how to haggle and things like that.
Yep.
That's one example. Another example that I wanted to give you for why I use Codex is the automations screen. For the past year, I've been banging this drum of hybrid automation, the idea of combining the long history of regular automation with LLMs. And for me, in the Codex app, there's the best sort of interpretation of this concept. There is now a built-in automations screen where you can basically save prompts that run on a schedule. That's the high level.
Yep.
And these prompts can be anything. Can point to native built-in plugins or skills. They're basically the same thing. Plugins are a bit more involved. A plugin may contain a skill, whereas a skill is just a skill. They can point to scripts that you have saved on your Mac. And for each automation, you can set a model, a reasoning effort, and a schedule. And I have a bunch of these to do a bunch of things. I think I'm going to talk about this in a column for club members.
Okay.
But this is how I'm syncing my audio notes from Monologue to my Notion, is how I'm automatically tagging new articles in my Matter queue because of the Matter CLI. It's how I'm automatically importing bookmarks from X into my Notion. Like all of these things that require both traditional scripting, but also an intelligent model that can coordinate these tools behind the scenes, they're perfect. And in Codex, you can go into each automation. You can see all previous runs in a sidebar. So it gives you an actual UI for something that you can do with stuff like OpenClaw, for example.
Yep.
But it's always, with OpenClaw, you can set up a bunch of cron jobs. Those cron jobs are actual text files, and they're hard to read. They're hard to debug. Codex just gives you a UI.
Right.
And when you give me the same power of a CLI, but with a user interface, that's when I'm happy. And that's why I like using Codex.
That makes sense. I think of the difference between plugins and skills as kind of plugins are made by somebody else and skills are made by me. And I know that that's not entirely true because I can make a plugin too, and you've made plugins as well. Yes. But I mean,
this is where I gotta hand it to Anthropic. I think Claude has the best implementation of plugins in the sense that so if you think of a plugin as a container of things, the plugin architecture of Claude makes a lot more sense than the plugin architecture of Codex.
Oh, and that's because they're different.
OpenAI is just copying the Anthropic implementation. They're just a bit late to the game because Anthropic came up with skills. Anthropic came up with plugins. So credit where it's due. A Claude plugin makes sense because it's a container of a bunch of things. Those bunch of things can be skills. You can have multiple skills inside of a plugin.
Right.
You can have hooks. A hook is basically something that needs to happen automatically when something else happens in a plugin. To give an example, my Shortcuts Playground plugin has a hook that automatically tries to validate a shortcut as soon as a shortcut file is written to disk.
Okay.
Right? That's an example.
Makes sense.
A plugin can also contain commands. Those are slash commands that you can have in a plugin to do different things. Again, my Shortcuts Playground will have a build plugin and a remix plugin, and a build command and a remix command to either create a brand new shortcut that's build or remix an existing shortcut.
Yep.
That's another command. So that implementation of plugins makes a lot more sense right now in Claude than it does in Codex, but I hope that OpenAI will actually just copy the Anthropic implementation and also support hooks and commands and sub-agents and all those things that Anthropic pioneered. And so, again, credit where it's due, Claude has the superior implementation.
Yeah, let me ask you this: as someone who is familiar with Codex, but I haven't used it extensively, what would be the first things you would do to migrate or at least mirror what you're doing on Claude over to Codex?
Very simple, because I've done it multiple times.
Mm-hmm.
You open Codex, you set the model to 5.5, medium or high.
Mm-hmm.
Enable fast mode if you have the subscription for it. And
does fast mode burn tokens faster?
Yes.
Okay.
1.5x faster.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. You point it to your hidden Claude folder, and you say, "Can you replicate my Claude setup for skills?" Maybe start with skills, and then if you're brave, also try plugins.
Yeah.
Can you recreate my setup in Codex in your separate Codex folder? And it'll just do it for you. It'll take the skills, some of them, it'll copy them verbatim. Others will probably make changes for, to mention Codex instead of Claude.
Yep.
It'll take the plugins, it'll try to recreate, change a few things in terms of metadata.
Does it change the prompts to make them more?
No, if you say keep the prompts verbatim, it'll do that. And,
yeah, but I mean, isn't the structure of the prompts a little bit different between Claude and...
You mean the prompting technique?
Yes.
I mean, sure. An additional step could be, once you have copied the skills, you can just, and I think there's actually a built-in skill creator and plugin creator thing in Codex that you can say, okay, once you have this, can you make sure that the prompt is fully optimized for you or for GPT 5.5, and it'll do that too. So since all of this is based on files and folders on your computer, it's very easy to do. You can just tell the model and it'll do that. And then at the very end, you can do a pass to optimize the prompt. In my opinion, that's totally optional. These models are smart enough that these prompting techniques, unless you're doing something very complex in science or academia, like, it's not really necessary. Yeah. The model will understand what you want to do.
Okay. All right. 2 other questions for you. First of all, about the in-app browser, what have you found it useful, and if so, what? And 2, have you used the built-in terminal at all?
I haven't used the built-in terminal myself. When I want to use the terminal, I just open the terminal app. Force of habit, I guess. Yeah. The browser I use a lot. The browser, I like using it to debug local web apps inside Codex. But mostly I like using it for the automated browser use, which is a built-in plugin. And today, when I did the Pokemon card thing, Codex opened this website to get a value for Pokemon cards, and it just operated the website on its own until it got rate limited. Because I guess that website was behind Cloudflare, and Cloudflare recognized the automated usage. Yeah. But to be fair, that happened after an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So pretty good. I get pretty good value out of the built-in browser and automated browser use. So that one I actually use a lot. I don't use the built-in terminal.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to ask you even more questions, because there's all these new features that came out with Codex recently. One of them that was very intriguing to me is one of those kinds of things that, OpenAI can say it, but whether it's true or not really is something you have to experience. And that is this, they have this, and I think it's beta, enhanced memory and also context-aware suggestions. Have you experienced that at all? And
Absolutely.
what do you think of it?
Yeah, enhanced memory is a real thing. There is a memory agent that runs in the background mostly at all times in Codex. You never see it in the app.
You don't need to tell it to remember things like you constantly have to do with Claude?
Nope. It's all automatically managed. And the reason why I can tell you with confidence that it does exist is I have created for myself a little app called CLI Chats that runs on my Mac Studio server and automatically indexes all of my sessions in Claude Code and Codex.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I noticed lately is that in the Codex section, I kept seeing this memory.md agent over and over, multiple times a day. And that's how it works. Every once in a while, it fires up, takes a look at your recent sessions, and tries to extrapolate useful information out of it. I can tell you that it is real because my own vibe-coded web app saw the memory agent.
Yep.
And since I noticed that it existed, I gave it a special section in my custom front end. So I can see what it does. I can tell you right now. Let's see. I can go into my own thing over here in the
probably
Codex
says
tab.
Remember to visit Federico and steal his Pokemon cards.
Memory when it last run. Yeah, it runs every few times a day. Yeah, you are a memory writing agent. Your job, consolidate raw memories and roll out summaries into a local file-based agent memory folder that supports the progressive disclosure. This is how it begins. Yeah, it takes a look at a bunch of things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
How about the context-aware suggestions? Have you seen much of that?
That I haven't seen, but I'm pretty sure that's because I'm based in Europe. Which is also, I guess, a tip for those listening. If you want to use computer use, and you're in Europe, you open the app and it tells you that it's not available to you in settings. You just need to log into a VPN, any VPN. Make sure that you are US based, and you will be able to enable the plugin. Now, in the first release, I was able to VPN into Codex, enable the plugin, disconnect my VPN, and the plugin kept working. They have since closed this loophole. So you need to stay connected to the VPN if you want to use browser use, which is not a big deal, but keep this in mind.
Good to know.
One thing that I will mention, John, in the most recent update to Codex on the Mac, there is now a very early but built-in system-wide dictation utility.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That's sort of competing with Whisperflow, Aqua Voice, Monologue, all of these apps. It's very bare bones, but it feels like the beginning of something. You can set a hotkey, and you see this little pop-up anywhere in the system that uses the model of Codex to transcribe your text in any text field on the Mac. Look for it, if I'm not mistaken.
It's in the settings?
You need to go into Codex settings, into general, I think.
All these apps have things in the weirdest places.
Yeah, I know, right?
You have to really dig a lot into the settings.
Yeah. There's also a menu bar utility for Codex, which also shows you your usage and a bunch of other things.
Yeah, no, I saw that the other day when I was looking. How about the CLI, Federico? With the app being so good, have you been using Codex from the terminal?
Not as much anymore.
Yeah, I would think not. That's what I was kind of expecting you to say. Yeah.
I mean, the CLI, I mostly use it remote from the iPhone and that's, I guess, my biggest complaint is there is no official Codex remote app for the iPhone. OpenAI has been teasing that they're working on one. I have been using the third-party utility that I wrote about on AppStories called Remodex, which is a remote Codex thing. It's pretty good, pretty great. Actually, it's a indie third-party project. I hope that OpenAI will come up with their own sort of remote companion utility for iPhone.
Yeah. Me too.
that connects to a machine on your network. But in the meantime, I mostly use the CLI from shortcuts using the SSH action. That's how, for example, I use Shortcuts Playground. How it calls Codex from the iPhone and iPad, it's via SSH. And did you know, for example, John, that it seems like Claude headless usage will soon be removed from part of your subscription?
Really?
It'll become API only.
No, weren't they doing some kind of, didn't they say it was an experiment or something? Wasn't
Oh,
that
it was. See,
Maybe not.
This is the other thing I dislike about Anthropic. They try a bunch of things, and when the community reacts negatively, they say, "Oh no, it was an experiment."
Oh my God, they'll be dead to me if they do that. I use that and all my web apps use headless. Like because I was like, why would I use the API when I can use it headless?
I hope they don't do it then.
And take it out of my subscription, which I'm already paying a lot of money for. So
yeah, so I feel, I mean, I can tell you, I've been very tempted to try OpenClaw again with GPT 5.5 because supposedly it's very good with GPT 5.5. No surprise that Peter now works at OpenAI and specifically optimized OpenClaw for GPT 5.5. But I haven't because it feels really nice to have everything into Codex.
Yeah, and, I honestly, I feel like you can get the benefits of OpenClaw, at least the vast majority of them, simply by setting up a system of cron jobs and things. And now with the way Codex works, it's even easier.
Exactly. With automations, I have a better UI for those. I have some kind of remote access in the form of Remodex, but as soon as OpenAI drops a native Codex app on the iPhone, I think I'm just going to go all in with that as my agent. That, the one thing that I need to figure out, I guess, is it kind of sucks to manage skills and plugins across different computers because I'm also using Codex on my MacBook Pro in addition to my Mac Studio.
They don't sync up?
They don't sync up.
Oh, yeah. That kills me.
And neither does Claude. Well, Claude syncs your skills, right?
It's the skills, yeah.
Yeah, they don't sync up. So
yeah, that's too bad. Well, I can come up with a system for that. I can come up with a system for that. But
keep that in mind. But cannot recommend this enough. Do try the Codex app on the Mac, especially if you're US based or if you can use a VPN for computer use. I was very skeptical of the idea of a super app, but it turns out a super app for productivity makes a lot of sense.
It does. And, we talked about in that episode, pulling the developer stuff out of the things like Claude's app or Codex. I'm not so sure that is a good idea after having seen the way Codex works, because after all, when you really get down to it, developers need the productivity tools too, and the productivity tools need access to the developer stuff, even if they hide it from the user in large part. So there are reasons to have those things together, I think. And I think a lot of that is related to what was built into Codex by the team that was working at Sky, who are working on the computer use and other similar things like that. Well, it's interesting, Federico. Very interesting. I got to dive in. I really do need to dive in. I've spent a lot of time with Claude. I'm very comfortable using Claude, but it hasn't been really up to the task the last several weeks or the last few weeks. So it's time to see if the grass is greener on the Codex side of things. So I'll do that soon. All right, Federico, that's it for this week's episode of App Stories. Thank you to Mercury Weather for sponsoring this episode, and thank you for listening. If you want the extended version of App Stories, visit us on the web. Just go to macstories.net to our podcast section and click on App Stories, and you'll see how to sign up there. If you do sign up for App Stories Plus, you get extended episodes that come out a day early and are in high bitrate audio ad-free. And of course, in the meantime, you can find me and Federico over at macstories.net, where we'll be writing, and on social media, where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees, JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.